So today's episode of On the Button, I'm joined by high stakes tournament crusher Ben Heath. My name is Matt Valeo, and we're just going to have a conversation about the big topic, which is Ben's recent $8.1 million tournament victory, or second place finish, I should say, but tournament winning at the Triton Millions down in the Caribbean. And yeah, welcome, Ben.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
So before we dive into that huge score, which I'm sure a lot of people would love to just, you had like the where you were super short stacked and you laddered up to second place. It's like a pretty fun thing to talk about, I think, in poker. But I think a lot of people would love to just know a little bit more about you. You're 25th, I think, in the all-time cash list. You're still like pretty young guy. Your hand and mob is really interesting. If you look back, just a few years, like you were playing, more mid stakes, a few like 10K scattered in there, but then you just like made the leap and started like crushing everything. I'd love to just like, I've had the privilege of getting to know you over the last year or so, but I'm sure a lot of other people would love to know more about your poker journey. Like maybe you can just like take us through like how you got into poker and how you ended up playing $500,000 buy-in tournaments.
I got into poker years ago. I mean, quite slowly, playing with some friends during like college, university. Played for a couple of years just with friends, and then during university I played a bit more online, but my university was quite time demanding, so wasn't putting many hours in, and I had no intention of like dropping out for poker anyway, if it was a possibility. So was just kind of learning slowly and playing sit and goes at the time.
So I'll pause right there. So like during that time, there was no like in your head like, I want to do this for a living, I want to play like super high stakes.
There was, I mean, I went to Warwick University in the UK, and there were multiple people who had already come out of that university and played very high stakes. So it was already kind of on my radar as a possibility, more than it might have been otherwise, because my personal tutor had students before that had done it. So, and they allowed me to do one of my second year paper on the game theory behind poker as well. So it was definitely like in my head that it was a job option, but I wasn't pursuing it in any way at that time. I wasn't like trying to take hours out of my university. I was, to play more. I was just playing when I had spare time, and with the kind of acknowledgement that if it was still an option when I graduated, that I could look into it then.
Okay. So there was no like super hard itch, like I have to do this.
No, I mean, I really wanted to finish my degree and was interested in my degree and wanted to do it, and was still open to other job at the time that like needed my degree to apply for them. So I really enjoyed playing, but it wasn't at the stage where I was like, oh, this is all I want to do, and I'm just gonna throw everything else away and focus on this.
Yeah. I think that really matches your personality, like at the table. If you watch like the Triton streams, you watch some of this stuff, you're just so like measured, calculated. You're obviously a very cerebral player. You're obviously studied player. But like you show just a level of like calmness, patience, that I think is somewhat unique in the poker realm. Maybe not so much today in the super high stakes realm. You see a lot of players that are like leaning more in towards the GTO arena, and just tend to be like very measured and calculated. But like it wasn't always that way. I came up in the poker era of like a lot of like emotions, like a lot of like very roller coaster type like heads up cash sessions. Tilt control was like I would say pretty rare. Like there was almost nobody that was immune to just going on like just stone monkey tilt when I was coming up in poker. And even some of my idols that I looked up to that were going on these like epic runs, would sometimes just like completely lose it, right? So like listening to you talk about your poker journey of like, yeah, I had interest in this, but I was focused on this, and like I wasn't going to deviate from that path. Like it's just like, wow, that's like so different than my poker journey, and like kind of really matches your persona at the table.
Yeah, I mean, I think it seems to have changed a lot over the years, and I mean, I think maybe it would still be the same if I don't think I was like the fastest person to pick it up at the time. And it wasn't like I was playing these games on the side of university and just making, infinite money. I think that if it had been pre-Black Friday and I was living with someone maybe who was already doing very well and I started making a lot, it would have been a different decision. But
yeah, sure.
I also just generally like finishing stuff. So I think it would have been very tough for me to start university and then not do it, especially just not really knowing the future and kind of thinking, a lot of people, it's very common in poker still to be out by your mid-30s, right? And
yeah, sure.
Like out of high, so
it's so easy to burn out of poker. Like lack of bankroll management or unrealistic expectations or not being able to adapt to the change in the game. I think that's probably the hardest one. It's different generation of players come in, different lines of thought, different theories, and if you're not adapting like constantly, it's just so unlikely that you're going to be able to stay at the top of the game. Almost nobody's been able to do it. We see like maybe DNegs is an example who's been able to kind of transcend eras and still have success, but like I don't even know if he's regarded as, I have my own opinion, and other people probably have differing opinions, but I don't think the high stakes like tournament community is like afraid of DNegs being at their table, right? So you would know more than me. I don't fire 50Ks or 100Ks, but yeah. If I were to like go and I talk to a lot of people in poker, and when the list of names comes up of like who are the most well-regarded players, that's not a name that typically comes up, although he's probably the most recognizable name in poker.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's very hard to stay on top of. I think even with like DNegs, he's playing other games too. He's playing a full schedule in summer, so there aren't even that many people that also do that and are the top anyway, even from the younger guys. But I think it's also kind of sometimes tough to stay in poker from the other end of as well. The people that do very well, there's also just an incentive to leave and do other stuff. Yeah. So, I think I was quite aware of that going in, that it's like quite likely to not be a lifetime thing, and you want to just kind of bail on education. But it was, I was also enjoying what I was doing. So,
okay. So, all right. So you started playing poker, you were in university, you thought maybe there's something here, but I need to finish university. And like, now you're playing like the highest of stakes. Like, what happened? Take us through the journey.
So I guess like just after university, I met Charlie Carroll, who was, I think I met him through like a Skype group because he was going to the same university the next year.
Okay.
So I think we were both in the poker group of the university already, and I met him, ended up like getting on very well with him. We moved in together in London for like a 6-month thing he'd already, I think he just won the Sunday Million and was playing 5-10 cash online when, he was 19 or something. And I was playing like 2 cent, 5 cent cash because I'd played like sit and goes, but I hadn't played cash and just started at the lower stakes.
Yeah.
And we kind of said, we get on well, 6 months. Like hopefully he could help me get to a stage where I could do it professionally. And if not, I would kind of, go a different route and choose something other than poker, but give it a shot. And then we were just playing cash and tournaments and playing all the time, basically. Just like that 6 months was just living in London, and we chose a place near the casino, and we're just mixing live cash, online and online tournaments, and pretty much doing nothing else. And then, from there, I think just kind of did that for a couple of years, just kept playing those 3 formats, depending on which games were on, and just kind of very aggressively moving up stakes as my bankroll allowed, and kind of lost it a few times. And then, I don't know, like just kind of just kind of kept repeating that, just like study poker and move up when it felt like a reasonable time to take shots, and then move back down usually, and carry on going. And eventually got to got to higher stakes.
I love it. So the thing I love about, hearing a story like this is like, obviously the super high stakes community is so small. And for a lot of players looking at like maybe starting out in poker, or they've been in poker a little while, and you look up at it just seems so inaccessible. The thing I like about your story is it sounds so normal. That's like almost all of us mere mortals start at, like I think I started at 10 cent, 25 cents. So, I was big baller, playing 25 no limit. And yeah, like, so like, I was so ecstatic to like win my first $1,000 online. To me, that was like, it was like the coolest thing ever to deposit $40 and then like look at like $1,000 balance in my account. It was like I was like on top of the world. And then of course, as usually happens, like you start taking bigger shots, you lose your money a few times, and like you have to learn like, oh, maybe my graph can't just go straight up. Right. Yeah. It sounds so normal. But yeah, like your journey is pretty awesome. But I'd love to talk about the recent tournament score. Like obviously winning in poker tournaments is not a new thing for you anymore. I think you're at something like 31 million, if I'm not mistaken, in live tournament earnings. So obviously like 8 million is still like a pretty gigantic sum of money for anybody, even like wealthy people. That's a lot of money. But it's like you're obviously no stranger to winning large sums of money. But like tell us a little bit about like this last year. I think like it probably wasn't your best year going into the Triton Million, just based on like what I can see in your hand mob. And like we also talked a few times, in Madrid, or in between. I don't remember. Like I travel so much, but I know like we met up several times in Madrid. And some of the other Triton stops weren't going super well for you. I'd love to understand like your mindset a little bit going into Triton Million. Obviously that's not like a tournament that's run all the time. I think it was the largest one in like 4 or 5 years, right?
I'm not sure. I mean, there's high stakes stuff. There was the one drop last year in Vegas. But was a lot fewer people. So I think it might have been one of the largest in terms of buy-in and entrance, I think, in a while.
Yeah, well, I saw some kind of statistic out there, like it was the largest. The one drop in Vegas was a 250K, wasn't it?
Oh, last year was $1 million.
Oh, last year was $1 million. Okay. I might just be like completely out of the loop here, but regardless, like 500K tournaments are not like spread every day. They're not spread every year. They're not spread every month. So they're a little bit different. Also, like getting nearly 100 bullets fired into it is, I think, pretty unique. That's incredible. Like to have 100 bullets into a 500K, like that's a pretty massive event in terms of prize money and even like the field that you have to navigate, right? Because a lot of times these super high roller bowls and stuff like that don't have anything close to that. And those are at slightly lower price points. So what was your mindset like going into that? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about like how your year was going. What was your mentality going into something like that? Like, because for you, this might be like totally normal. Like, hey, it's just another tournament. But for like the average person, like, I think like they'd be like sweating bullets going in to play a $500,000 tournament, even one time in their whole lives.
Yeah, I mean, the year before that was my worst year of poker in my career in terms of money lost.
Yeah, we're talking about 2024, right?
2024. Yeah, 2024.
Okay. Gotcha.
These games are huge. Most of the, not these invitationals, but most of the Triton events are unlimited re-entry.
Yeah.
Somewhat turbo-y structures and people playing very aggressively. Like you're just in for quite a lot of bullets often. And I think I played Jeju, Montenegro, and Monaco and had 3 min caches across like 30 days of poker with unlimited re-entry. Obviously, that's just, it doesn't matter what happens in Vegas or the other stops or in like EBT Monaco. It's kind of like if that happens, you're just getting crushed.
You're just buried, yeah.
But it happens. It's just like how these stakes are. If when you speak to people online or you look at graphs online and someone shows you a graph of 500 bullets, this doesn't really mean anything. But that might be how many Triton bullets you play in like a 10-year career. So, you're just going to have these huge swings. So obviously, like, it sucks. Yeah, it's like, a long period, I think. Whereas online, it would be maybe like 2 Sundays, or it might just be a Tuesday and a Sunday, and that's your like, oh, I had a bad week. And online or like live, it's just stretched across an entire year, and you're like, I had a bad 2024. So
Well, I think
yeah, it wasn't great going in, but
yeah, the thing is like, even if you understand the variance and the nature of, playing tournaments for a living, even if you're very comfortable with knowing that you can go on these downswings and it's completely normal and within the realm of like standard variance, standard deviations, you're still a human being, you know what I mean? And like, we're not computers, we're not androids. Like there is an emotional toll, even if you like, I've been in poker 20 years. So like, I can go and play games and win or lose, draw, and like, I can shrug off almost, I feel like most things now, things I wasn't able to do 10 or 15 years ago, I can go into, like a good example is I was playing at table one. Shout out to Art Parman and Justin Young, another Phenom ambassador, who run a really fun game at the Aria. It's a 25, 50, 100 game, no limit. And they do a lot of fun things. They do, double board, bomb pots, and 7 deuce game and stand-up game. They do a lot of fun stuff. So it's not that hard to lose like 25K, which unfortunately I did in like a very short period of time. 10, 15 years ago, like I would have been like, boom, oh, like 25. Now it's just like, well, that's poker, right? But when you stretch that out over like an extended period of time, right? And like in your case, we're talking about like you're having the worst year of your professional career. It's hard for the average person to fathom that that's not affecting you emotionally, mentally, confidence. And maybe it doesn't. Like there are people that are wired differently that way. So like going into playing the Triton Million, and obviously there's other events in the Bahamas as well. Is it just another day at the office, or is it like, were you struggling with confidence? Were you changing things? Like maybe you can take us a little bit deeper into Mr. Ben Heath.
I would say, I think it affects everyone. Even if it's not confidence, it can just be like being annoyed. Like you would be annoyed if you just like flipped a coin 15 times in a row for a lot of money with no edge and just like lost them all. You can just be annoyed that you lost the money, even if you're like, yeah, it was a 50-50, whatever. You're still just allowed to be annoyed that you lost a bunch of money. It's not fun.
Yeah.
Confidence wise, I think sometimes like I think again, most people would be. Usually when I'm pretty much throughout my career, whenever I've lost a lot, I just work harder. Like I have my baseline working amount, and if I'm losing a lot, just to kind of really double down and not have that confidence issue of, oh, maybe it's not working, maybe I'm not working enough. I just kind of like don't let that creep in by just working more. And like, oh, okay, well, like now I'm working more, I'm definitely working enough now. And then, but I think that's usually in between trips of like, oh wow, I lost a lot of money that trip. I need to just like go over things, check things are okay, speak to some friends maybe, and usually you just come out and just like, yeah, okay, that's just tournament poker. Let's like carry on. I don't usually feel it going into the next ones because I don't know, it doesn't really matter. And also like one tournament doesn't matter that much. Like,
yeah,
yeah, I would be, if someone said to me, hey, you might lose for the next 18 months, similar amounts, just straight. Yeah, that's going to make me more anxious. But going and playing one more tournament, I'm just like, okay, it's fine. Like it's almost kind of written off. I'm just like, okay, 2024 was a bad year. I'm going to go to the Bahamas, play these like final 2 games, and then I'll go home and evaluate what happened and check if it was a bad year because of me or because of variance. And so it's almost like slightly more relaxing going in. I'm just like, this year was terrible. Let's just close it out, lose the last bit of money they're going to get from me this year, and then come back. And it's just like that. That's the mentality. I think a lot going into these tournaments is, you want to win, and I usually feel pretty confident going into them. And this was an amazing event. But yeah, not too worried about, like, I'm not going in thinking about the past year.
Yeah. No, and I think that's the correct mentality for a professional poker player. I'm more trying to connect the dots for maybe a newer player that is like, how could you just, like you're down to like millions of dollars on a year, right? These are like unfathomable sums of money for the average person. And, for the younger aspiring poker player, up and coming player, maybe they're not playing professionally yet. Maybe they're a regular player who's working on their game. I'm just trying to give him a little bit of an insight into like one of the top tournament players in the world, someone who's only playing, super high stakes in, some of the toughest competition there is. What does it take to have a bad year, walk in, fire a $500,000 bullet, and turn it into $8 million? Like it takes a very specific mindset and a specific set of skill, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of it. So I guess I'll start with just finishing the last bit. I find it much harder to get over big mistakes than losses. Like,
yeah,
if I go and lose 100K in a day, I will maybe feel not great about it at dinner, and then the next morning will just kind of be back to normal. Whereas if I made a big mistake the day before that I know is a mistake and should have known before, or just feel like, I should have, it was avoidable or too big a mistake to be happening at these stakes, I'll feel bad about it for 4 to 6 weeks, just and kind of scaling down smaller ones. But they can make you feel very bad for a long time, and I think that's something that most high stakes players have, is kind of a detachment to the money, which for people coming in, it seems hard. But when some people say, like you said, that some people might just be wired differently. But when I first started playing and I was playing 5 cent, 10 cent, I would lose like $4.50 and just be sad all day. And that, those were the stakes I was playing then. I'm like, that's 4.5 buy-ins. I feel terrible about it. It was, it was worse back then because I didn't even understand what that meant. And I had no idea what I was doing. So I think a lot of the switching off about the money comes from just most people in these games have just been playing high stakes poker for years, and you don't suddenly switch off from 100K or 500K. You play 5Ks, and then after a year they don't feel like big anymore, and then you play 10Ks and go through that process again and again, and eventually it just feels, it's your highest stake. Just like someone playing highest stake 2K live might feel the same about 2K. I think the thing that people have in common more at the high stakes is that focus on mistakes. Most people I know and speak to, they make a big mistake, it will bother them for a long time. Whereas I think sometimes you speak to people at like easier games, and people are just like, that was probably bad. We all make mistakes, whatever. I'm just gonna play the next one, and like they don't even go and look at it or. And I think that's the main difference. I think the money thing just kind of happens naturally as you progress through the stakes. It has to, and for anyone it doesn't happen naturally, they stop moving up stakes at some point.
You're probably playing the wrong stake if the money becomes the core thing. That makes total sense. And thank you for that insight. Well, cool. So the Triton Million, there was like a lot of very interesting hands. It was an interesting, it's obviously a very interesting format, bringing, however they want to talk about it, VIPs together with 50% pro fill, but it creates like very interesting dynamics, particularly on day 2 and beyond. Is there any like particularly interesting spots you can tell us about before we get to like you having, what was it, like half a small blind, like a quarter of a big blind? I went through and I watched some of the stream, looked at a bunch of hands. A lot of them seem like fairly standard spots, but there was some interesting hands. Have there been any hands that like stood out to you, during the course of the tournament leading to like the final table?
Honestly, for me, it felt like a fairly straightforward tournament in terms of the hands I was dealt. I don't think I was dealt any crazy spots. I think that there's actually some really interesting spots on day 1 because you're in this kind of satellite to get to the joint field where the field is soft.
Yeah.
But you're playing a very tough table.
Yeah. You're not in get super creative on day 1, obviously.
It's a little weird because it depends on the level, because you can be towards the end if you still have your rebuy. So maybe if you're at level 2 and you play crazy, you bust, you now have 8 levels where you're in this really bad situation where you're having to play kind of a suboptimal strategy if it were a tough tournament to try and get into the softer field, which you don't want to be forced to do. But if you look at it the other way and now you're on like level 7 and you still have your second bullet, maybe you're actually, depending on the kind of big blind per 100 discrepancy between the two fields, there can be spots where you do want to gamble because it's worth so much more having the big stack going into the joint field. And if not, you just rebuy and get the same stack anyway. And you're only forced to play an extra level or two in the tough field. So there's kind of a spectrum of how going from like really not wanting to gamble to wanting to gamble a lot. But obviously you can't take it too far because otherwise people can just do the opposite and run you over for the first 4 levels if you're just like trying to avoid all these big spots. So that's very tough because I think, it's kind of not solved exactly how you want to play. People have some different views on it, and you're playing, usually it's a table of 8 against 7 of the best players in the world who are also all very good at figuring out on the fly like what's happening. And I feel like usually the kind of situations where I was like, oh, that was very unusual, happen on day 1 of these, whereas day 2 is a bit more kind of like, I've played a lot of these approaching the bubble spots in soft fields. Yeah, this one's slightly softer, but it's kind of just an extension of normal exploit of how do I want to adjust to this soft field. This one's softer, but it's the same theme in the same direction. Whereas day 1 is just something that you'd play once a year, and it's just like how the hell do I deal with this level 6 where I'm on my first bullet, this person's on his second bullet, and he's 3-bet me. Like, figuring out on the fly what that 3-bet range is even going to look like is where you get the really interesting spots, I think.
Yeah, I'd love to understand, maybe like from a strategic standpoint, when the field combines and now you're dealing with like a pretty loose cannon, like pretty like a complete wild card in my opinion, in like the winner Lococo. Like, how do you go about trying to construct his range? How do you go about trying to figure this guy out when you're playing pots with him? Because there's just nothing conventional, or in some cases it even seems completely random how like the spots he's choosing to bluff, his sizing. Like it's just like I'm curious personally, like how do you go about figuring something like that out?
So I mean, I have played it before multiple times.
Okay.
He does actually play live a fair bit, so I don't think it's kind of as new as it looks, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do agree that a lot of it seems, a lot of sizes will not be consistent, but that's true of a lot of kind of non-professional players, which can just be they don't want to, or they have no set strategy that would mean they even know what size they're picking. And so I think a lot of that stuff is going to be kind of tricky to figure out because they might not know. So there isn't really anything to figure out. It is just like an part of randomness to it. So it's kind of just like focus on the things you can try and figure out, make mental notes of the things that are happening, and if there's patterns, pick up on them. And then for the bits that you don't know, you'll generally have a kind of this player leans aggressive or this player leans tight in these spots, and play a somewhat solid poker game given that very general note, and then kind of zero in on more specific exploits as you play longer. But in one tournament that might not always happen, like because you're just not seeing that many showdown hands anyway. So yeah, some of it is, again, like if you were playing online and someone said to you like, hey, you're just going to play an hour of cash game with this person, what are you going to do to exploit them? You'd be like, well, I'm not going to do that much, really. I'm going to play as if they're like from that group, if I think they're a good reg or a bad reg or recreational. I'm going to play as a kind of general strategy against that group, and then I will exploit them if they play my game for 6 months. And I think it's similar in these tournaments. Sometimes it's just like, well, I'm going to play, I didn't even play on his table that much. I'm going to play 50 hands against this guy. What can I do? Not that much. I don't know what's going on. So I think some of it is just kind of try to not level yourself too much either. Because sometimes you see that, people will level themselves another way and think, oh, like all recreationals play like this, so I'm going to go the other way. And then they just torch it themselves into someone who's actually playing kind of fine. Whereas if you just play solid and just good poker against someone who is not, you still win money off them. You don't need to be specifically targeting them, but there's generally stuff you can pick up on of just at least like pre-flop frequencies just by seeing some showdowns where you're just like, oh, that open isn't even close. So, but yeah, I mean, pretty hard to kind of zero in on turn frequencies or something when you're playing 60 hands against someone.
Right. But you did have some history with him. So hopefully
I have played him. Yeah, I played him on the bubble of the 25K in Monaco last year, I think. And I played him in a couple of other tournaments. And he played similarly as expected.
Yeah.
People play their style of poker.
Yeah, sure. So going to the final table, you're on the final table, you lose a big pot, you wind up in a spot where to say you're short stacked, I think is an understatement, right? Like you ended up in a spot where you had something like half of a small blind.
Yeah.
It is, I mean, and obviously the pay jumps are just like massive. Maybe you don't got to spend a ton of time on it, but I would love to just like hear your mindset when you're sitting on like fumes and you somehow ladder that up into a second place finish. Like, how are you feeling during that period of time, and how are you feeling like coming out of it? Are you just like walking on clouds? I mean, I would be, but it's incredible. You also folded in a spot like getting like, I don't know, 22-1 or something like that. In a I think there was like two kings or two queens on the board. You had 9-7. You're getting just like massive odds there. As played, it didn't seem like anybody had the trips. So like you were maybe live drawing to 6 outs. I think I want to say most people would just put it in there, like be resonated to say like, I'm either going to beat this or I'm out of the tournament. But you folded, leaving yourself with half a small blind. Would love to just like jump into your mind just a little bit, because like that decision, it's obviously not a single decision that's going to yield the outcome, right? But that decision obviously is like is the first like decision that led to you eventually whatever it was, 20xing or 40xing your stack and having a chance to ladder that far.
Yeah, I mean, I guess starting with the mentality thing, because it depends what your beliefs are on how much your thoughts affect stuff. I know a lot of people try to stay very positive in these things and always like, oh, no matter what the situation, I can win. I think I'm much more with the probabilities and not resigning, because you just want to play good poker, right? You want to play good poker, whatever your stack is, and it doesn't really matter. And I wasn't that emotional at the time, but after that big hand I lost, there was a break, I think, and I went and asked Seth Davies like if he knew what time the gym closed. Because I'm just like, well, I'm like 98% to be out next. I'm pretty sure it closes kind of early, and I want to make it because there's another tournament tomorrow, and I didn't go to the gym today because of this final. Like, I want to go before it closes. So
yeah, no.
Mentality wise, kind of I'm just like, I'm probably going to be out. I would just want to get that information, and then I'll go and play the rest of the tournament and see what happens. Not that attached to it. It's kind of again, like you enter these tournaments and you don't really get a choice in the result. You just try and play well. So at that point, we're still just kind of in that mindset of just pretty switched off about the result. And but yeah, and then kind of for the rest of the break, think about how you're actually meant to play on these insanely short stacks. It's a little tricky because it was also a very aggressive table, because you can have tables where you have 4 people who are very much trying to just wait and make sure that this person who has half a small blind busts before anything happens. Whereas Lococo was kind of making it clear that anyone could just be out at any hand. He was like, I think he had one spot where he like flatted when I was short, and Elliot, not sure if it was him, but someone squeezes and he back shoves and shows a 5. When they had like similar stack, he was kind of making it clear that anything could happen.
Well, the Lococo strategy was very clearly ICM is for poor people.
Yeah, it was just like, I'm going to put some people under tough decisions, and if it backfires and goes badly for me, then so be it. Which
who cares?
And so that hand, I think it was 300, 600, and I had 1.375 million, but then had to post the 2 600, so I have 175 left.
Yes,
after posting, and Lococo opens the button, small blind calls, and it's Jack 3, I think, or Jack 4, one of the two.
Yep.
And then turn the other one, so it's Jack 4 3. and small blind bets. And yeah, I mean, honestly, I still don't know. Like I was planning on looking at it. I've just kind of taken this Christmas off since then. I thought it was very close. I think my odds, I think I needed something like 4.5% for Chippy V. But if I have 2 live cards, I have around, 13.
Yeah.
But firstly, small blind's not meant to be bluffing that much because they're very incentivized to keep the button in. Because what if he bluffs King 10 and I have Ace 5 and the button folds Ace 7 and now he just could have got the page up. So he's not really incentivized to bluff that much.
Right.
And then his value is kind of starting at 5s and 6s, which is ones I'd actually have 6 outs against. But then other than that, value is 7s plus, which I have 3 outs against, 10s plus, which I'm dead against. And then a bunch of the bluffs because of the small blind flat, even if he's bluffing something like Ace 7 himself or King 9, I don't actually do that well either because they're a lot of like mid card flats. And then I can still just be dead against the button because the button's going to still have some hands that check back the flop, like the 3s or just Ace 9 that doesn't fold or aces. So I can be dead a lot. And then next hand, you get this spot where I post in the small blind. The big blind posts the big blind and the ante, where I can win the whole ante. And often what happens is the chip leader opens and the big blind folds. So then I get this really insane spot where I get a massive layover on my 175. So I think it's a lot closer than it looks, where it's like, yeah, you need 4.5%. But if I think someone is, they bet third pot, they're not actually meant to be bluffing that often just for betting third pot anyway, right? When you bet third pot, you're not meant to have that many bluffs in your range because you're giving the other person odds and dead to a lot of the value, any trips and, and a lot of the bluffs only have 3 outs against. So I think, and then you get the next hand, you get this really nice layover spot. So, and then I thought as well, you get this layover spot and then you get a free orbit where you don't need to post the ante.
Yeah.
With someone who is trying to bust himself and other people pretty hard. So I kind of just decided that it was worth more. And also we saw what he had, so it kind of turned out to be somewhat true, somewhat not true, depending on how you look at it. But Lococo fights pretty hard for pots, and for him to just miss the C bet, I'm not sure how often he actually just has a stone 0 and just folds after it. He should, because he shouldn't be that incentivized to C bet something like 7-8 off because maybe he wants to bust it too. I think it depends on the exact stack distribution, but I was in the mindset that he was not going to be giving up that much after checking back.
Yeah.
And, we saw he raised King 6 off. So I think that was true. And I thought that the small blind who's, a very good player, would also be aware of that and I wouldn't be bluffing that much in his spot either, just because I think it's a spot, in theory, you're not meant to bluff. And I wouldn't choose that one to overdo it at all. I would probably way underdo it because I think that Lococo's fold to the small blind bet there is going to be really close to.
Remind me what the small blind had.
I don't actually remember what the small blind had.
Did he have value, or was he stabbing? I feel like he has to have something.
No, he snap folded. He maybe did. No, actually, I'm not sure why I don't know that. I think maybe someone must have sent me a screenshot of the King 6 or something, and I just didn't even think about the thing after. Because I think it was just late when I came second, and then just
yeah,
that was it. I'm not sure exactly what he had.
Yeah, I mean, you ended up folding, and ended up spinning it up over the next orbit or so, to a playable stack.
What a spin. 175K. Here it is, 6.3 million.
And got yourself heads up for the title, and you ended up getting in Ace King against something less, I presume, right?
King Deuce.
Oh yeah, King Deuce. So
he had a 9-1 chip lead or something heads up.
Yeah. So one of those spots where you get it in good and it doesn't work out. He's obviously gonna be forcing you in a lot.
Yeah.
But But yeah, I imagine 8.1 million probably spruced up your 2024 a little bit.
Yeah, and ended up being one of my better years in poker. So yeah, it kind of fixed it. Yeah, I mean, it was a ridiculous spin up. I remember the next hand after folding the 9-7, I was posted all in the small blind and didn't look at my cards until showdown, and it was 7-5-4-3 deuce where the river completed the wheel, and I was like, that's really bad for me because the open is just, it was like hijack open, not even the chip leader, and I was like, that's just not, it's not what you want to see. And my first card was a 6. And then just obviously won a bunch of hands. I think the time I was like happiest, usually just like kind of switched off those things. I think the time I was happiest was when the person bust in 5th, because I was just like, oh wow, that was absurd. Like, I actually got a ladder. It's not really fun as well. You know, that 9-7 spot, we're still talking about it now. I still don't know what the correct play is, and it's not fun doing those things where you're like, oh, this is actually a chance to still win a 4 million chip pot, kind of still be in the game. If I fold, I'm pretty much just out next hand. And it's like, it's not very fun to do those things. If, you know, even if you think they're correct, it still just like takes something out of you. You're like, I don't want to fold getting 22-1. So it's pretty nice for it to be rewarded in the sense of just like, you see the person bust 5th and you're like, wow, I actually got one ladder from this. This is
right. Fun. Yeah. I mean, the fun part for me is just hearing your thought process in that spot, because I think a lot of people are sitting there saying like, okay, well, I could be dead, but if I fold, I'm essentially out of the tournament. Most people would consider having a small blind in that situation being effectively out of the turn, or half a small blind, sorry, would effectively be out of the tournament. I think most people feel that way. And then, you know, the fact that you're getting 22-1 and maybe you're not dead, I think a lot of people just like kind of resonate saying like, I kind of have to take the spot. But hearing how much thought, you know, is getting put into like making that decision, it just shows like a different level. Like me, I'm not a big tournament player. I never have been. So like these are spots that don't exist in cash games, right? You don't have ICM in cash games. You don't have you know, survival premium and like potential to the ladder. You don't have any of that shit, right? It's just like, okay, I'm gonna call off here, and if the only decision I have is, do I, you know, if I lose, do I reload or do I quit? You know, so it's fascinating to me. And I think it would be even fascinating to the average tournament player who's faced with that kind of spot, you know, because these spots do happen for much lower stakes. And I think for a player who maybe plays tournaments regularly, but, you know, at a different stake or a different situation or whatever, can just like hear how you think about that situation. I think it can open their eyes a little bit to some of the possibilities. Like it's a real chip in a chair story. I mean, it's, dude, half a small blind, you still, what were you, 6-handed?
5.
You're 5-handed? Yeah. Okay. So like half a small blind, you're 5-handed. Like, dude, that's to ladder that in a 5th or ladder that into a second place finish for $8 million. Like, money aside, to ladder that into second at all in any in any circumstances, like, is awesome. And really awesome. I was when I was looking at that spot on the 30-minute delay, live for me, but on a 30-minute delay, I was like, dude, I paused it. I was like, what the fuck is he gonna do here? He's getting 22-1. You can't see, like, I have the benefit of seeing the cards. You can't see the cards, right? So like, I know you're live, right? And I'm like sitting here going, am I rooting for him to call or am I rooting for him to fold? You know, and you know, I guess it's probably technically a correct call. I think it's very close, like you said. Obviously, if you know the cards, it's a call. You know, you're getting a very good price. But yeah, without knowing the cards and then knowing that like you're going to have a chance to win the big blind any next hand, and plus if you happen to survive next hand, you get the free orbit. Like, the more that I hear you talk about it, the more that I like your decision.
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to know. I think it's just going to end up being really close, and those decisions don't. I think they're very interesting. I think poker's an interesting game, and you get some things that are very fun to think about like that. But it's not a decision that would kind of haunt me if I was wrong, because I'm just like, okay, this never happens. This thing doesn't affect your win rate in any way. These situations are so rare, and it's going to be so close either way. I think that even if someone was just like, you're wrong, It's like, okay, like, sure. Has anyone ever played that spot? Like, of course you're going to guess wrong sometimes. It's just like how poker works. You get thrown in spots you don't see ever, and you're going to just like guess and do your best and get them wrong. I think it's more like, if I was playing just a big blind versus button spot at 30 bigs at the final table and just kind of 4-bet jammed a combo that was nowhere close, like, yeah, I'm probably going to feel bad about that, because I'm like, oh, that's actually a spot where you're going to play a lot of final tables, and to be so far off does affect your win rate, and you need to go back and study. But this isn't one where I'm like, oh, I need to go back and put that in a solver and find out what the solution was.
I mean, dude, obviously Coco could have easily just checked back a jack there to induce, and like he's opening almost infinite range on the button, so he could literally have any cards. And presumably the small blinds, they obviously have a big incentive to bust you, but the small blind presumably is not flatting there super wide, so both players could easily have you dead, right?
Yeah.
Right. So no, I mean, as you could have, yeah, you technically folded, like, being live there, but it's so hard to calculate the survival premium and something like that as well. So even if like you're getting the right price, and I actually talk about this. I used to talk about this a lot with players who, like, lower stakes players who are making decisions. I used to do a little coaching back in the day when I was a decent Melon player, and like they were so focused on like making the right decision, per pot odds and EV decisions, all that, but they weren't making proper decisions relative to like risk reward in their bankroll, and some of these things have to be like taken into account. The general gist of it is, yeah, like you might be faced with a spot where you're 1% in the in the right, like you're getting 1%. You should call it, like, because theoretically, if you play out infinite hands, like you're going to realize you're, technically speaking, that's correct. However, let's say you're in a really soft game and you're going to get offered way better risk reward spots consistently. Should you be like trying to realize your EV in a spot where it's effectively a coin flip, right? That if you take it a million times, like, yeah, you're going to realize you're 1%. Awesome. Like, or you're going to get offered way better spots, and relative to your bankroll, like your bankroll can actually support doing the flip a million times, right? Like those things should get taken into account. They're often not, because those, some of these players are watching the pros and they're watching them, like, trying to like realize EV for like massive amounts of money. And it's a completely different scenario. A lot of those pros are back. They know they're going to be playing. They know their edge is relatively small against the field a lot of the times. And so like those differences matter. Whereas somebody playing like in a 1-3 game, a super juicy 1-3 game, shouldn't be like trying to chase like a 2% EV spot, right? Like he should be waiting for some guy to offer him, a 70-30 spot, where he's just gonna like be stacking the guy all the time, right? So anyway, little tangent there, but yeah, what a, like, not to be like super result oriented, but like what an awesome result to finish the year.
Yeah, fun way to end it.
So what's so what are you up to, man? Like outside of we talk a lot about like obviously like your poker journey and Triton and all that stuff. Like what's next for you? Is it just business as usual, waiting for the next stop? I noticed you were playing online on Phenom. I think it was yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just took the last like 2.5 weeks off, pretty much, which I have done very little of over the last however many years. I think I maybe did a little during COVID, but kind of either side of COVID. While I've been playing a lot, I'm typically playing, studying, or coaching pretty much every day, and never have full days off. A day off might even just be like doing other work or just like accounting and stuff. So
Yep.
Not just having full days off. So the last couple of weeks was quite nice to do that. Now getting back into it, like you said, yeah, I played last 2 nights. I was playing on Phenom, playing like actually started playing some PLO, which is really fun. Haven't really played. I was playing some 5-card PLO last night, and then was also playing some like 2-4 no limit heads up, which is a lot of fun as well. Playing, like playing tournaments, you just don't get to play heads up very much. So playing these different formats has been very fun, and is kind of a way of slowly easing back into it. And then also today started some tournament study as well, which will be, there's actually quite a big break now because EBT Paris got cancelled. So the next event is Triton Jeju, which is early March, I think, or late February. So there's like a 2-month gap. So yeah, it will be a mix of studying, coaching, and then when I really feel like playing or want to play like this, like some heads up, different format stuff, playing on Phenom.
Awesome. Well, we're super happy to have you as a Phenom ambassador. I think you're regarded as one of the top minds in the high stakes tournament arena, and just like getting to know you, talking with you, seeing how you think about poker. I can see why you're so well regarded. It's very clear that you think about the game and game theory on a very high level, and that you also put in the work. Like, it's just like, I think that's you meet some players who are just like gifted intellectually and they're left brain thinkers, and like poker's very like attractive and stimulating for some of those people, and they might have a lot of like innate ability, but like I think finding the people who have just like super strong and consistent work ethic is very rare, and one of the reasons why people don't last super long in poker, because talent can only take you so far. And I think that's true of almost any industry. Like you have these like really gifted athletes, but sooner or later you run into a point where like being gifted is just not enough. And like at the professional levels, it comes down to like, having like gifts is great, but like having work ethic is the thing that's going to actually give you a long career.
Yeah, I actually have said that, I think, quite a bit. It's something I get asked quite a lot in coaching is, what does it take to get to high stakes? Are there like secrets or whatever? And, there's a lot of factors, obviously, because there's just some raw thing of how well do you understand poker, right? Like if I'm not very good at tennis, I can't change. Like I played tennis when I was young. I had 0% chance to get to, there was nothing I could have done to get to top 10 in the world. And, there are some things like that where there's kind of these caps that we don't know exactly what they are. With tennis might be a little easier to see some of them. With poker, it's a little tricky to see exactly what they are, but they probably still exist. But you can get very, very good especially if you start early, and, now with solvers and stuff, you can just get very good. But when people have asked me I think when you look into high stakes and look at the things that people have in common, it's the one I said earlier of really hating making mistakes. And then like the main one, I think, is just work ethic. Like everyone at these stakes is just kind of playing or studying all the time. And it's just like, how much do you want it? Like you said, it's like most industries. It's just, if you want to get to, I think a lot of people are looking for shortcuts or secrets or, it's just like,
it's very common in the gambling world.
Study all the time.
The gambling world is like a very unique space in that like everywhere you look is like the shortcut to riches, like jackpot here or win a $5 spin and go for $1 million. And, there's just like all kinds of stuff like that. And the reality of like being a professional poker player is like, you have to put in the work. You have to grind out your edge. It's possible you could be on the right side of variance and just win massive sums of money in a short period of time. But if that's your expectation, I think you're just like, you have the completely wrong mentality, and you're very likely to lose whatever you happen to win. The thing I like about you is it's very noticeable talking with you about poker, that like you get it, you put in the work, and like you're not like disillusioned, right, by having early success. Or you meet a lot of people like that, right? Maybe they want a tournament when they're 21. Maybe they want a few tournaments when they're 21, and like 10 years later, they're so disillusioned. They haven't put in the work. They're like waiting to bink it again. And a lot of them are broke. Unfortunately, that happens probably a lot more than it should to smart people in our industry. Before we close, I'd love to like just get your thoughts on like you mentioned like you're playing on Phenom lately. You mentioned that you started your career playing online at university. Maybe we can give people a little bit of an insight into like your thoughts on the state of online poker and the industry, and like what made you decide to join Phenom as an ambassador, and like had other opportunities come up prior to that? Was it, was there something specific you were looking for? And just like maybe share a little bit with the audience of how that came to be.
Yeah, I mean, I played it online at the start, like I said, and kind of throughout the years was playing still a decent amount. I would say less and less. I found the tournament schedule quite hard at one point, which is why I dropped my volume a lot. Just, it kind of requires you staying up till 4 a.m. a lot. And when I got to a point where I didn't want to play 5 days a week, that meant I was playing just Sundays, ruining my sleep schedule for the rest of the week, which just I found a little tough for like the lifestyle with the live games.
Yep.
But we're still playing and still doing that, and we'd still play on live stops, and we'd still play Sundays and play Scoop, W Coop, the big series. Then I played some very high stakes games online during COVID, and pretty sure I got cheated in some, like, in at least some ways. There's some stuff that kind of could have happened, but we're not sure. There's some stuff that's pretty sure we're pretty sure happened. I don't think the games were completely fair, and I lost a lot of money. And after that, coming out of COVID, I was just like, that felt really bad. I knew some of the people that were doing that. Was kind of friends with some of the people that were doing that.
Are you willing to share any names? Or
I mean, I'd rather not now, just because I think there's a lot of stuff. I think a lot of people. The stuff that was really confirmed 100% was like pretty public anyway, so the people that really care can find it or will already know. I mean, it's just a bad feeling. Even if you had this thing where nothing had happened, it's a bad feeling. You don't have to be worrying about this stuff. I mean, it's usually a worry with kind of high stakes gambling in most industries. You have to be worried about this stuff, but I really don't like that. I like poker as a game. I like enjoying it.
Getting cheated by people like that is. It's like the stone worst.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, it's obviously worse when you know them, and maybe it's if people you didn't expect, or I think some of it's just going to happen in poker. You're like, people are going to try and cheat you sometimes if you're in poker playing high stakes or any stakes really for long enough. But I think, like I was saying, to work hard at poker for a very extended period of time, you really have to love it. I don't think it's I think most people who can do very well at high stakes poker could probably do better money wise in other industries. So you really you have to love it. And as soon as you're just like, why am I playing these games at 3 a.m. that I'm being cheated by someone who I thought was like a friend of mine? Like, what's the point? So I just completely bailed on online after that. It's like, live games are good. I don't need to play. Like, I play poker. I really like poker. Nothing's forcing me to play poker. And I didn't enjoy it, and was just like, I'm just out until this gets cleared up, kind of thing. And over the years since then, I just haven't been confident that it's been cleared up, and which I think is a very hard problem. So I just don't I don't think there's going to be this magic thing that happens where I suddenly do feel confident it's being cleared up. But I didn't even feel confident I was seeing an effort for it to be cleared up. I was seeing some stuff that was like, oh, we did this publicly, and then hearing stuff in the background that wasn't being done. And it just feels kind of like marketing stuff. And
we talked about that, actually. I don't know if you saw the podcast we released just a few days ago. It was myself, Brian Rast, Eric Baldwin. There's a whole segment in there where we talk about the industry paying lip service. And it feels like that's been happening for a while. And a lot of people feel the same way as you. It's like, yeah, I hear the rumblings of like, maybe they're doing something, or maybe they want to do something, but like, it doesn't really match what you're hearing, what you're seeing. They just don't seem to match. And when that happens, you're just kind of like, no, thank you. That's how I felt, because I used to be a high volume online player. And I just watched the industry kind of descend into this current state. And I've just been kind of like, no, I'm good. Like, I'm not sure one way or the other, but I don't have the confidence. It sounds like maybe you have a similar. Well, you were like, sounds like you're fairly certain you were cheated during this, COVID time. Maybe it was a club game or a private game. I don't know, but it sounds like in a lot of ways we have a similar viewpoint on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on your stance and like personal preferences, because there are still, you can be cheated and still be in winning games. And if you don't care about that, or you just think the game is good enough and you can just like switch off from that, then you can do that and just like hope you're not getting cheated more than your win rate. I really don't have that. I kind of like playing poker as if it's like chess, where I would enjoy playing poker not for money, but trying to play well. And having these external things of like, do these two players know each other's cards is not something you want to be. It's not part of the game. It's not meant to be part of the game. I don't want to play that form of poker.
No.
And I think with how things have gone, it's going to be a tough thing to solve. I do think that there is a thing where a lot of the time when there are people cheating, it can be either people who are playing very high volume, or it might be the people the game's running around and the game's running around them, but they're actually have the edge. And a lot of the time the sites are just very incentivized to let it happen. Not always. I think that, I don't think sites are doing nothing, but I don't think they're completely aligned with player incentives. And often their main incentive would be to kind of do enough that the players think the site is secure. So with Phenom, I was pretty happy with this thing of just like the community actually has a role in ownership and in voting, and that if things, I don't think there would be a way for Phenom to just instantly solve things from the start. Of course, like it's the ecosystem's in like a tough place right now, but you at least allow this kind of align the incentives where the players playing a lot on the site are going to have a say in how things are done. And if things got bad, it's not these people who have completely different incentives to the players making the decisions on what to do about it. As far as I'm aware, that hasn't been done before. So that was kind of my reasoning for coming back to online poker, was that if I could be a part of something that I thought had a chance of doing something differently in a way that would allow me to actually play poker online again, because I love poker as well. If I stopped playing professionally, which at some point I will, I'll still be playing poker. Like, I think there's a reasonable chance that I do something like quit this format of no limit tournaments that's so demanding, and then decide to, as a hobby, learn PLO. Because I never did that, and it's another format of poker. It's super interesting, but at the moment, like, it doesn't make sense for me to commit time to PLO cash when I'm playing very high stakes no limit tournaments. It just doesn't. Right. It just doesn't make sense. But
come on, I decided, you want to get in the mixed game streets, buddy. You want to come play.
I mean, I played 5-card PLO last night and loved it.
No.
I think like if I stop like games. The real mix, I think it's going to be. You might get me when I'm. Maybe in like 20 years, you might get me. But like,
because the average like mixed game player is not 25 years old, dude. I mean, like, you got to come to Vegas and come play some like deuce to 7 drama. Then I know you've really wanted to put your foot in the pond.
Yeah, I think might be a while.
Not gonna happen.
But yeah, I mean, the kind of just to finish on it was that even if I stopped playing these very intense games that take a lot as a full-time thing, I would still be in poker and would love to have. I wouldn't just kind of cold turkey quit. So having somewhere that I could play PLO online to learn and feel good about playing there. If there's a kind of a site that I think has a shot at doing that, I was like pretty excited to be a part of it and see if where it can go.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we're grateful you decided to reach out and have a conversation, and yeah, like for those that don't know, I think Ben had reached out after one of the Triton stops this last year, and we ended up just getting together in Madrid and having some drinks and talking about it. And that's kind of how we've approached most of our team building and ambassador building and everything at Phenom, is just like having very open conversations about like what, you know, what's important to us, what we're trying to do, what's good for the community. And if the alignment is there, you know, typically the person has shown some interest in joining, or some have like we've gone through like, with some we've gone through like really intense diligence. Like some of the players out there have like agents, and you know, they had to like vet it legally and do all this other stuff, and that's all fine and good. But yeah, I'm grateful that we had those drinks. The place was really nice, by the way. We should go back sometime. And yeah, we're definitely happy to have you as part of the team.
Yeah, me too.
All right, man. I have to know, did you already buy your celebratory bottle of wine after Triton Million?
I've had quite a lot of wine over the last couple of weeks. My friend was in Bahamas at the time, and I didn't really know what to do wine wise there. I don't usually drink on poker trips, and then the night before I left, he gave me a bottle, like a Californian bottle that was very good. So that was kind of that was my celebratory one that was gifted to me. I didn't, luckily enough, by someone a friend who had some action and had wine with him. So that was my like celebratory one, and then I think the rest just qualifies as Christmas wine.
Fair enough. Well, the last time we hung out, we had a couple of very nice bottles, a Bordeaux and a Spanish, I believe.
Yeah.
So my expectation for the next round, I'm gonna treat it as a celebratory in the Triton Million. My expectation is high.
Yeah, it sounds fair enough.
Well, awesome, dude. Thanks so much for taking the time on a Saturday to have the chat with me. Yeah, Ben Heath, everyone.